Today is Saturday, and regarding the next week's schedule, we will have the Analects class on next Saturday. And Monday, Tuesday, we will have Suragama. On the Saturday, we'll have the Analects, and the following week on the Saturday, we will have Uttara Tantra Shastra. So it alternates. In terms of studying the Analects, we have finished the 6th chapter, or the 6th part out of the first book. Now we move to the 7th chapter, and by chapter I mean then one sentence over here that's marked. On the 7th, it says that Zisha said, if a person is able to appreciate moral worth as much as he appreciates physical beauty. In fact, in this simple teaching over here, it includes 5 aspects. That was the first one. And in this chapter, all the teachings are given by Zisha, who is a disciple of Confucius. He is 44 years junior of Confucius, and around the beginning of the war state, he was a great scholar. He was a disciple who propagated the teaching of Confucius. And Zisha, he talked quite a bit about academics and teachings, especially around the 11th book, which Zisha and Ziyu talked quite a bit about literature, such as the previous one, when the master said in the previous chapter where he said that if he has energy left to do more, he should devote himself to the arts. And talking about devotion to devoted the time to the arts as well as academics, I think this is much of the influence of coming from Zisha. The disciples of Confucius also gave lots of teachings, and it is included in the Analects. In Buddhism also, there are the teachings that's given by the disciples, such as Shariputra, Madhgalyayana, Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, and Ananda, and so on. All these kind of disciples and bodhisattvas who would also give teachings on the truth. And whatever they teach are also viewed as no difference than the Buddha's teaching. And over here, it talks about how Zisha over here then give this teaching. That if a person is able to appreciate moral worth as much as he appreciates physical beauty, In fact, this is interpreted very differently, and especially the Chinese language has different meanings. Therefore, it is then interpreted in different ways. On top of that, because it doesn't really have any lineage or any kind of lineage that's passed down, therefore the interpretation of certain contexts could be very different. Unlike in Buddhism, the majority of teaching are passed down through lineage. Therefore, the teaching is very much similar. And such kind of teachings cannot be violated because of such kind of lineage of teaching that's passed down all the way from the previous masters and their masters and so on. But the teachings given by Confucius doesn't have such kind of lineage. Therefore, different scholars and different philosophers would then explain the teachings by Confucius and his disciples in various different ways, in the ways that they then understand. I think the previous masters, their language have many different meanings. Like could have very profound meanings. And because of such profundity, everyone could use their wisdom to then interpret, and we can have very different perspectives to look at such teachings. We can definitely take and study other people's perspective at the same time to then interpret in the way that we understand according to our mentality and understanding. Over here, it says that if a person is able to appreciate, the first one is appreciation, and the second Chinese word which means noble or sense of integrity. And then the third word in Chinese, it says that it is very easy to change or prone to change. And in general, what it means is that if one person has this inner integrity and inner value, this person doesn't have to care too much about the external or the physical beauty. This four goes around. This four, in fact, discuss around the family, such or people around you, the community around you, such as the family members, such as a wife and husband, and then parents, and then the king or emperor that you serve, and then the friends. So it talks about the four different groups. And then the first one, it talks about how if one is able to appreciate the moral worth within the other person as much as he appreciated physical beauty. Or the other way of explaining it is that if a person has great moral worth, then that person's physical beauty is not as important. For example, if people's external appearance are not really so good looking, but if that person has great charisma, even if the external appearance is not of the most beautiful and most attractive, but still people would like to approach them. There are people nowadays who have lots of money. Maybe they're not so beautiful looking, but since that person is rich, then other people also have this tendency to approach the rich person. Just like that, if a person who is rich in inner morality and inner charisma, then even if he doesn't look so beautiful on the outside, then others can still be very much attracted to that person. Anyhow,
当时的这个
despite
战
the
国时期
different
来
ways
讲的
of
话呢，
explaining
实际上
it,
是非常的这个重视内在的这种这个德
during the
性
war
啊，就是如
state,
果内在有德性的话，那就是即使它外在的这
even
个现
during
象呢，
that
就是
time,
并不是特别的这
the
种
emphasis
这个
was very much
庄严的
placed
话，那就是
on
也
the
有
inner
它的
morality
这个不公的
instead
这
of
种
the physical
魅力啊，
appearance.
就像以前在那个应该是尧舜禹之前吧，就是远古时代的时候呢，就是当时
The
有一个叫做
uncommon
是这个
charisma
木木啊，
is
就是
much
这个
more
中国四大
important
名四大
than the
处女
physical
之一
beauty.
嘛，就是中
Just
国也有
as
四
in
大
the
处女，
ancient
也有这个
times,
四
it
大
is
处女。
recorded
那么
that one
据
of
说
the
她
most
呢，从历
ugliest
史上看呢，
women
她呢，
in
就是
Chinese
有
history
胖啊，有
that
黑
is
啊，
recorded in
有
Chinese
臭
history. In
啊，
fact,
就是有
throughout
这个
history,
从这个形
you
象上看的
can
话，那这个
see the
应该说是
description
不
where
能
it
互
says
换
that
的，就是
she's
除非是非洲这个
she's
个
of
别国
this
家。
really dark
那么她
complexion
呢，
that is
实
not
际上这个
appreciated
智
in
慧
the
超群啊，就
Chinese
是人心善良，
aesthetics,
然后
and
而且呢，就是
really,
有很多
really
这种非凡的
overweight
这
and
种
not
这个
very
善良
pleasant
啊，
to
什么
look
这个
at.
宽容啊、包容啊等等这些功能。因为这个
All
原
of
因的话呢，就
such
是后
kind
来
of
就是 当
physical
时的
appearance
这
and
个国君的
qualities.
话呢，就是也
But
是这
she
个介
has
入嘛，
lots
他
of
并且
inner
对他的这
morality,
个辈
such
分呢，就
as
是对他
she's very
就
inclusive,
是
big
有很多的
hearted,
注目
really
法，
kind,
所
and
以说
very smart,
也
have
是
lots
在
of
这个
wisdom.
过程上呢，就是得了一定的这
So,
种这
despite
个胜
her
利啊，就是尤其是他在
ugly
术士是有一些
physical
发明啊，
appearance,
就包括这
the
个古代的
emperor
这个
took
镜子，
her
当然这个
as
所谓的
one
镜
of
子吧，
his
可能不像现
consort.
在的镜子一样
And
的，就是但是这个母母
because
呢，
of
就是
her
有一次发现就是
smartness,
石头上啊，就
she
是然后
invented
那个时候可
different
能没有现在的
objects,
美女照镜，就是那样的没有，然后
including
那
a
个时候
mirror.
就是他看到那个石头
Her
石
name
板就是
is
石块上呢，就是看到自己的
Mumu,
面
and
相，
she
可能模模糊糊的，并不是我们现
at
在那么这
first
个就
she
是
was the
清楚
first
啊。
one
那个是什么
who
铜
discovered
金
the
啊、石
reflective
金啊，就是
quality
这
of
样的。
certain
然后
rocks.
他呢，
And
本
then
来自己
she
这个长相那么丑的话，
was
那就是
very
他不愿意，
much
甚至可能我们有些人的话，把这个镜子就是马上
startled
炸烂，
by
马上炸掉，
the
就是
look,
这样
her own look
但
that's
但他没有这样，并
reflected
且
in
呢，
the
就是把
rock.
这个就是就推荐给
At
别
that
人，
time,
就
there
是
was
后来的话
no
呢，就是
there's
发现
no
就是
actual
就实
mirror
际
that we
就是
use
在发
nowadays,
现的
or
实
in
践。
the ancient
所以
times
说从
that's
某种意义上，
then
包括
made
当时
by
中国年的
different
这个
metals.
其实
But
也
she
是
then
从长相上讲，历史上是
saw
可能
this
并不是那
reflective
么好，
quality of that
但是
rock
呢，
and then
他的智慧呢，就是远
used
远
that
超过
quality
诸
and
多年
made
所以诸多年的
mirrors
很多
available
的这种
to
这个
others.
他的这个战略思
So
想的话，那就是也是背后有他的这
she
样的这种知识啊，就是
her
他的一些
wisdom
规
and
划啊，
smartness
就是有这样
was
的。
what
所以说呢，
impressed other people
在某
and
种意义上，
then
就
passed
是
it
人的
down
这
to
种这
future
个长相呢，当然
generations.
这个也很
Same
重要。
as
现
a
在这
great
个时代的话呢，
famous
就是好像
man
这个颜值
who
呢，就是
was
代
very
表
good
一
at
切，
his
就是
strategizing
也
and
也有这样
was
有这
very
个
important in
长
Chinese
相比
history.
较好
His
的话
name
呢，其
is
实性
Zhuge
格恶
Liang,
劣
and
也好，
he
或者说
married
这
to
个
a
等等
really
等，就是有很多的这种非常
unpleasant
粗鲁的这
looking
种
woman,
故事的
but
话
she
呢，
was
也许
very
可能
smart
站出
and
来
she
讲
then
更明
made
显，人们都
lots
是这样
of
说的，但实际
inventions
上可能如果
before
这个内
he
心呢，
did,
就是
and
不是
she
很善
inspired
良，就
him
是不
further
是很
to
温
make
和。
lots
这样
more
的话呢，就是时间
inventions.
长了以后，你
So
再怎么样，
sometimes
可能会有一些
some
这个不同
people
的吧。
could
因为
appear
人
to
毕
have
竟
very
是
good
生活在
looks,
这个
but
时间
even
当中
if
的话呢，就
with
是
the most
仅仅是依靠
gorgeous
一种完面的这
the
种
most
教育
gorgeous
来
physical
这个解决
appearance,
很多问题的
if
话呢，就是这也
that
是
person does
很
not
很难
have
的。最
very
重要的
the
就是人性的
gentleness
这个
and
善良，就是人性
friendliness
的善良。
towards
不过
others
呢，
and
就是现在
inclusiveness and
在这个时代当中
kind-heartedness.
的话呢，就
So
是
these
不管
kind
是
of
男的女
qualities,
的
if
呢，
these kind of
就是都
qualities
是
are
一
lacking
方
from a
面长
person,
相也是很重视
then
的，
doesn't
但另一
matter
方面的
if
话呢，
he or she
可能
looks
更
really
重视的
beautiful.
是内在的这个智
Other
慧。
people won't get
前一段
attracted.
时间那个
Yes, nowadays
法
people
国总
do
统跟那个
very
巴
care
西
very
总统
much
啊
about
之间的
the
话呢，就是一
external
直是因为
appearance,
个
but
别的
what's
一
the
些
most
这个他
important
们
is
之
the
间的
inner
一些
wisdom.
特殊的这种关系吧，
Just
就互
like
相都有
during
自
the
己这个
G7,
喜怒啊，这
G7
个最近那个
the
马克龙以后，他夫人
president
这
of
边的话呢，也
Brazil
是关于
had
就是说是我们现在这个时代
this
的话呢，就是应该
debate
是难易度
with
是
Macron,
应该
the
是这个平等的，
French
就是并不是关心
president,
这个外在的，应该内在的这样的一个时代，
because
就
of
是因为
the
对方就是
looks
晒一
of
些照片嘛，就是说这个比他就是大24岁的
Macron's
这个他的
wife.
法国夫人的话呢，那么就是法国人也是说是
And
我们可以说他就是你们国外的人呢不应该说我
The
们的中国的
First
地
Lady
府
of
人。
France responded to
实
the
践的这
Brazil's
种
president.
长相呢，就是在某种意
The
义上
French
是
people
这
was
个
really upset
也
because
是大家都比较这个关注的。
they
不过
felt
最
that it
重
was
要的
very
呢，就应该
humiliating
是
and
从
responded
长远来
that
看，
we can
实
say
际意义上来讲
we
呢，
can then make judgment
最
and
好是
make
这个
different
内在
comments
的这
about
种
our
功
First
能，
Lady,
因为
but
人
you
的长
can't.
相呢，
Someone
其实是非
as
常
someone
短
who's
暂
not
就是
even
不管是
French.
你这个男士也好，
So
就是女士也好，他的这个长相呢，我
anyhow,
觉得是
people
就像这个
nowadays they
夏
do
天的，就
care
是夏
so
天
much
这个
about their
在当地的话呢，
appearances,
2-3
but
个
the
月的这
looks
种
are
花，
very
就是看
temporary.
起来是非常的鲜艳，但是很快
The
的时间
looks
当
are
中就
just
是
like the
就出现这
fresh
个秋
summer
风秋霜
flowers
就是
in
然后秋热，
Tibet
就是
that
这个
would
时候呢，
wither
就是基本
within
上
1 or
都
2
会
months.
就是最后这个
At the
变
first
成了另一种
sign,
这
at the
个
first
颜色。其实人呢也是这样的，
frost,
如果是
all the
仅仅是依
flowers
靠
will
外表来
wither
的话呢，
really
外表
fast.
是就是随时都是会改变的。那么常有的
Just
就
like
一
the
直是伴随
flowers,
着一生的，伴随着
people
生生
could-
世世的，就是我们内
people's
在的这
appearance
种
could change
美，
really
就是
quickly.
内在的美呢，就是法王以前也
No
是经
one
常
could
讲，
maintain
就是
their
这个善良的
external
心就是不害
appearance
任何众
for
生的
a
这样
whole
的
life.
一颗善良的心的话
Pons
呢，
Rinpoche
也
also
许在某
said
种这个
that
社
the
会
most beautiful
群体当中呢，就是受到就是别
mark
人的
of
这
a
种侮
person
辱啊、
is
歧
not a
视啊、
physical
轻毁啊，
beauty,
有
rather
这
the
种可能
inner
性。
beauty.
但是从长远来看的话呢，那么心地善良的人呢，那么在这个不管是
If you do
这
not
个任何
have
时代
a
也好，
good
任何
heart,
场合当中也好，
if you do
在
not
任
have
何
such
这个
kindness,
这种情况下的话呢，就是都是
doesn't
对
matter
自他
what
都是
kind of
有利
time
的啊，就
you
是所以
are
我们
living
一
in,
般来
what
讲呢，
kind
就
of
是他对你的这种
community
这个
you
显现
live
意色的
in,
话呢，古人这个
you
应该是
will not
就是最重视的是什么呢？
thrive
就是内在的这种善良啊，就是内在的善
without
良。
a kind
那内在
heart.
的这些善良的话呢，在某种意义上面是远远就是超过这
So
个外在的这种
the
美色啊。
Confucius
外在
also
的美
gives
色
this
的话呢，
teaching
就是
on the
它也
inner
许可能
beauty
吸
and
引
the
个别
inner
人，但是
morality
呢，时间长了
values
以后的
much
话呢，
more
就是
than the
那么它内
external
在的这种这个
appearance.
功德或者是
Yes,
德
the
性就是
external
跟不上的话
appearance
呢，
could
也许
attract
可能
some people.
自他都
But
带来
if
许
a
多的痛
person
苦。
doesn't, if
所以
a
说
person lacks
这个
in
第
the
一个呢，
inner
就是说
morality
这个
and
显
inner
现意思
beauty,
啊，就是这个
then
道理。
such
那么
attraction
第二
won't
呢，
last
就
long
是
either
讲
and
这
could
个
probably bring
这
lots
个
of
师父
suffering.
母能结其力啊，就是说这
So
个
that's
诚
the
实这个
first
父母
level
啊，
of
就是要
this
要
teaching.
诚实
The
自己的
second
这个
or
双
first
亲，就是
aspect,
父
and
母
then
的
the
话呢，
second
应该
aspect
是有
is
这个孝顺的这
be
种心
able
啊，就是
to
要
serve
恭敬
his
自己
parents
的这个
with
父母，
utmost
一定要
effort.
以自己的这种这个能力的
So a
范围
person
当
should
中啊，
be
就是尽心尽力的
respectful
啊，
and
就是
have
竭尽
a
全力的
filial
什么呢？
piety towards his
就
parents
经常
and
就是
serve his
就
parents as much as
就是尽
possible
孝啊，就是去
to try one's
我
best
们
to
现在很
serve
多人就是
one's
可能尤其
parents.
尤其这个西方有些这个年轻人的话呢，他们都觉得父母呢就是对有没有恩
In
德
the
呢
West
就
nowadays,
有一点，
especially the
但是
West,
这是一种
young
偶然
people
的一种这
have
个
not received such
既然就
education.
是
And the way
因
they
此就是
feel
帮我
is
这个来
that,
到这个
yes,
世
the
界
parents
而已。
do
实际上，我对
have
真正的
um,
这个父母的这种恩德呢，就是并没有特别
great
的去考虑，就是更重要的
kindness
就是
towards
考虑
them,
这个
but
自身啊，就考虑这个自身。那么这一点呢，就是可能跟这个东
but
方的这
the
个
kindness
是
or
儒家思
repaying
想
the
也好，
kindness
佛
of
教
parents
思
is
想呢，
not
还是有
of
很大的
the
这个差别。
priority on
其实
their
从
mind.
佛理上
Rather,
看的话
how to
呢，其
benefit
实我们每一
oneself
个人呢，
is
来到
of
这
the
个世界啊，
priority
就
for the
是
young people in the West
最根本的
or
是
the
可能
ones
是
who
这个父母
received
啊，
the
如果
Western
这个父母
education.
呢，就是当时没有
But
这个慈悲
according
的这个
to
维
the
护你的
Eastern
话呢，就是
philosophy,
你如
philosophy
今
as
的
well
这样
as
的这种
Buddhism,
成功也好，如今的这样的一个壮大的话呢，就根
we
本
consider
没
that
办
if
法的。有些人
the
就一直
parents
认为
did
啊，
not
那个父母对我不好，所以我也对他不好。但不管怎
care
么
or
样，
did
再不好
not
的话呢，我相信
take
就
care
像
of
我
the
们这个千
child
禧本
with
网里
great
面讲的
kindness,
一样的，
then
让你呢就是
there's
没
no
有
way
这
for
个
a child
饿
to
死，
to
让你就
survive.
依靠父母的这种恩惠的话呢，
According
就
to
不让你饿
the
死，不让你
commentary
冻
of
死，不让你
words
这
of
个
my perfect
负难，
teacher,
就
it
一
is
直
says
是你
that
就那么就是
the parents
就是刚
at
刚这个
least
生下来的时候
kept you
的话呢，
alive.
就是
You did not
好像
die
这个
because of
有
thirst
有
or
有什么这
hunger
个
or
有这样的这种这个
coldness,
就这种生命的
but
话
you
呢，就是它
survived
一直就是保护到这个
because
今
of the
天的话呢，
care,
我想
because you were
我
under the
们这
care
个
of your
任何一个对
parents.
你没有恩德的人的话，那不会对你是
And
这样
they
的就不管是
protected
吃的
you
穿的从小的
until
你的教育啊等等，
that you
很
are
多
of
方面
this
讲，只
age.
要 有两者
So
的，有这个有
they
信的人呢，你
definitely
的父母
have
再怎么样
such
不好
kind
的
of
话呢，就一直就是让你长大成这样的话呢，如果我们
kindness
是一个
towards
有
you.
识之士的话呢，就
So
一
for
定会
those
是有
people who
感恩之心，就是不
could
应该呢
remember the
仇
kindness
恨
of the
之心，就是
parents
这是要竭尽
or
全
could
力的，就
not,
是这
at
个
least you
孝
should
孝
remember
顺父母，这
that
是第
you
二个
are
方面
alive
的。
now because of the
那么
kindness
第
of your
三个呢，
parents
就是
and the
施
care
君
of
啊，
your
就是
parents.
能这
So
个
you should at
知其
least
身，就是
repay
那
their
么对于这
kindness.
个君主啊，就是对
And
他
the
的这
third
个领导，
aspect
对他
talks
的上
about
司，
to
那
serve
么对他的话呢，就是应该是 作为
to
这
serve
个
his Lord
那么
without
就是作为他的下属的话呢，就是
self-interest.
能这个舍弃自己的身体和生
His
命呢，
Lord
就是这个
refers
维护
to,
啊。
for
那为什么
example,
是对父母是尽心尽
to
力，对
his
这个
manager,
国君
to
或者
his
是对他
boss,
的君
or
主呢，就
to
是要付
his
出一切的。原因是什么呢？
lama,
有
teacher,
些解释说呢，
such
就是
as
因为
these
父母
kind
是
of
毕竟是
people.
自己这个家庭的，就是这样
One-
只要对他尽心尽
Over
力，就
here
是
it
这
talks
个
about
孝顺
one
就可以
should
了。
then
而这个君主的话呢，就是他这个涉及到很多人啊，就是他
try one's
他呢
best
就
to
是一个
serve
社会的
the,
这种
his
这个
superior.
主尊啊，就是应该说社会群体的一个这个领导者。那么
And
对
it
他呢
is
就应该
outside
是
of his
要
own
就
family,
是
such
用
as
这
his
个一
parents
切的
and
这种这个身心来
and
进行这
elders.
个维护
Rather,
啊。
it
就
is
像
his
现在
superiors
可能很多
who
国家也是
probably
是这
has
样吧，
more
就是比如说对
responsibility
父母呢，
towards
就
a
是也要
larger
这个
community.
恭敬，但是尤其是对他的这个国家领导也好，
In many
那么这
countries
些的话
it's
呢，就是
like
一
that
定要
nowadays.
用这
It
个
is
他的
important to show
就是特
respect
殊的
to
这种
one's
这个行
parents,
为呢，
but
就是对他
it
进
is
行这
also
个诚实和
as
恭敬和
important,
这
if it's
个
not more,
爱戴，
to
就是这也
show
是
respect
就许
towards
多人来讲呢，就是
the
他是
superior,
涉及到一个
to
群体，
serve
涉
the
及到一个群
superior,
体
to
的话呢，
care
就
for
是
the
你一
one's
定要用你
superior.
自己的这种生命来这个维护啊，就是这也是很
It
重
in
要的。
fact
有些
comes
人可能
to
对这
a
样的这种
different
这个
community,
这个思想呢，就是也许可
a
能
larger
有不
community.
同这个观点，但一方面说就是这也是
I think
可
it
以
must
的，
be
但另
a
一方
little
面
bit
呢，就是
difficult for
是到了一定的这种这
people
个
to
阶段，或者是在某种这个社会
understand
体系
this kind
的
of perspective,
这样
but
的
it
这
is
种
okay for
风格
you
下
to have a
文化下
different
的话呢，
opinion as
就是
well.
这也是完
Because
全是可以的。就像以前那个
this kind of teaching
就是
works
南宋是吧？
also
就是
in
南宋
different
要接近
time,
末的时
in
候呢，
different
就是当
society,
时
different
有一
community, in
个
different
就是宰
mindset.
相是吧？就是宰相呢，就是他
During the
带着这个
southern
8岁的就是
Song
这个
dynasty,
他的这个皇帝吧，就是
there was a
应该是这
cabinet
个国君
who
就是然后呢，就跳跃而这个历史了。
ran
这个
away
是跟
with the
历史上
young
说是
emperor
有
who was
10万个
only
人呢
8
就是
years
也是
old
一
at that
起来
time.
就是
And
就当
because
时就是当场
the
就一起来
Southern Song
离开这
dynasty
个世
was
界。这个原因是什么呢？因为这个君臣的话呢，就是对他的这个君主呢，就是有100%的
was
一种这个信仰，
deconstructed
有
at that
100%
time,
的
and
一
they
种
were
这个
chased
尊重
by
自己。但是
over
到了这样的
100,000
这种非常
armies
这个关键的这个
or
时刻呢，
soldiers
就是他
from
不
their
愿意把
enemy.
这个国君呢
Therefore,
落到
at
低
that
的这个
time,
树立，然后让他
the
这个活活
cabinet
的这个
then
折磨而
carried
死。
the
他不愿意这样
8-year-old
那最后的话
emperor,
呢，就是只有就可能有一种这个
and
英
he
雄壮
didn't
志的
want
这
to
种
leave
精神吧，
this
就是
child, this
就有
child
一种
emperor to his enemy because the child
什
would be
么
tortured to
啊
death.
我们藏族有
Rather,
一种
he
说法叫做是
then jumped
不愿意什么就是
from
带着狐狸尾巴
the
或者而那
cliff
个
and
庄严的老虎
died
而死
in
去
the
就是
ocean along with
就
the
意思是
the
缺
young
弱的这种
emperor,
狐狸就是
so
带
that
着尾
they
巴而
died
活着呢，
with
就是不愿意
integrity
而
rather
庄严的这
than
种这个老虎呢，就是
humiliation
他
and
就很威
suffering.
严的，就是他就
In
英雄
Tibet,
的
we
死去
say
不愿
that
意好像大概意思是这样
a
的，就是所以当时呢，就是因为这个原因的话呢，
a
就是后来
tiger
就
would
是
rather die as a
这个
hero than dying
宋
as
宋朝中
a
已经灭了嘛，
fox,
就是这个元朝来就开始
because
就是当时元朝
it
就
is
应该是
important to
中国
die
人
with
对吧？
integrity
就是
rather
就
than
那个时候开始，就是所以
to
从历史
live
上看的话
under
呢，
the
有
skin
些
of a fox,
是
which
这个
is
对
not
自己的这个国君
very
也好，就是这些的话呢，非常的这种一切，
which
就
is
是包
not
括
of
他的这个身
which
心
is
一切
not
都是
very
可以
honorable.
可以付出的，就是
So
这个
over
是
here
可
it talks
能
about
很多
honor.
国家也是这样吧，就是为了这个国家和为了什么
A
这个
cabinet,
人们的利益
the
的话呢，
cabinet
就是他
then
就把这个自己的最宝贵的
sacrificed
这个生命呢，
himself
就是都这个
for
献出
the
去，这
emperor
是各
for
个
his
国家的这个不
superior.
同的 的这个历史当中呢，就是都有不同的这种宿命
Therefore,
吧
he
啊，就是
sacrificed the most
那么这
precious
是从
thing
国
of
君来
his
讲
that
也
is
是这
his
样的，
life.
或者从其他的一些
In
包
the
括一些
history, there are
宗教
many
啊
different
对
stories
于
such
不
as
同的一些
this.
宗教的话呢，就是很多宗教徒就是围绕就是他的这个
Some
宗教
religious
或者说
and
是围绕
culture.
他的这个这种这个他的怎么说啊，就
In
是
fact, lots
这
of
个上士的
religious
话呢，就是
people,
也愿意就是付
in
出自己
fact,
的宝贵的
died
生
from
命，就是
protecting
也有
their
这样
own
的情况。
religion,
所以说他这里呢，就是说对自己的这
or
种
they're willing to
家人呢，就是应该
sacrifice
是这
their
个
lives
以这
for
个善
the
善
person
良
who
的这个
give
德
them
行
the
为主，
precious
以自己的父
teachings.
母呢，就是要接近呢，就是对他就是进行这个称圣，然后以自己的
So
过去呢，就是
what
那
the
就是
point is,
付出一切的一切呢，就是
it
还是
points out is that
然后与朋友
the
交际的
family
话呢，就
members
是
should
言
have
而有信啊，就是
lots
与这
should
个
have
跟自己的这种志同道
morality,
合的
inner
这种朋
morality
友
that
呢，
is more
就是与
important
他
than
这个
beauty. And to
交
one's
往，或者是
parents,
与他结交的时候
one
呢，
should
一定要有
serve
一
them
种
as
这个
much
诚
as they
信啊，
can to
就是
repay
一
their
定要有
kindness.
这
And
种
to serve
心呐，
one's
这个信
lord or
任。现
superior,
在
one
西
should
方
be
人也
able
是就
to
是非常这个讲究，就是所谓
be
的这个
completely
信任，就是我们世间人的话呢，
devoid of
连这个
self-interest.
信任都没
And
有。
then
如
the
果
next
信
one
任都
talks
没有
about
的话
how
呢，那有
to
什么可谈的了？就世间人
be
经常
with
这样讲的。
friends.
但所谓的这个信任的
So
话呢，
in
就是
his
看看这
relationship
个
with
每个人
friends
的这种
is
状况是不
trustworthy
同
in
的
words.
有些人是很难信任的，就是他自己的这个人性啊，
Trustworthiness
就是
or such
特
kind
别
of
的这
trust
种
is
浮躁
in
啊。
fact
那这样的
quite
话，可能
valued
别人也
nowadays,
不一
especially
定
in the
容易
West.
信赖你。然后你自己呢，信别人也是很困难
There
的，
are people
尤其是
who
我们现在啊，就是有些
are
人是
rather very
确实是思想
superficial.
是非常复杂的
And
啊，就是
for
思
such
非
kind
常
of
复杂的，
people,
就
it
疑
is
心
very
很重
difficult
的。
to be
这样的人的话呢，
trustworthy or
可能
to be taken as
就
the
很痛苦
trustworthy
的
one.
啊，就是很痛
Nowadays,
苦的。
lots of
所
people
以
have
我
lots
有
of
时候觉得
doubts,
是
have lots
可
of
能人就是稍微
complexity.
笨一点好，
And
就
for
是
such kind of people,
我
I
看
think
到这
they
个
live
牦
in
牛啊，就是牦牛是一般它没有很敏感的这种感
great
受，就
suffering.
包括它就
Therefore,
是吃它的草啊，就是然后喝它
upon
的水，就
witnessing
是然
such
后
kind
就
of
吃草和喝水以
mentality,
外呢，就
I
是它
think
就
to myself
就是
from time to
它
time
虽然有什
that
么就是
maybe
它
it
的
is
这个
better
感情
to
啊、长恨
be
心啊这些，
slow from
但是
time
不
to
是
time
很
rather
明
than
显
being
的。
very
我以前
smart and
应该是
full of
从那个
doubts.
5、6
Just
岁
like
开始，
yaks.
当牛童，就是到
Yaks,
16 岁，
they
就是然后
are very
后来读书回来
simple-minded.
的时候呢，
They
也经常
only
就是
looks
放
for
猫的。有
food.
时候我在这个山上
I
啊，就是在
was
山
a
地上
yak
这个
herder
蓝
ever
天
since
白
I
云
was
下，
5 or
在
6
绿
years
草上，
old
然后
until
我看到牦牛
15 or
它是很
16
幸
years
福的，
old.
就
So I heard it
就
for a
它就
decade.
只要有
I
草
would
地，
herd
然后
under
就
the
它
blue
就
sky,
吃
the
好了以
white
后呢，就
clouds,
一直
on
这
the
个
beautiful
就
green
就是
carpet
追
of
着，就是然后
grass.
它饿了的
And
时候呢，
from
就
time to
就开
time,
心
I
起
would
来，然后
contemplate and
然后
think
有
to
时候呢，
myself
就是
that I
它
think
在一
yaks
些
are
什么这个
quite
柏树啊、
easy to
松树下呢，
fulfill.
就
They
是
have
就
this very,
就
they have
它
this
摸一摸它
contented
的
life.
脚啊，
It's
就
very
是然
easy
后
to make them
是有这
happy.
样的，然后就是
They
它
would then
就
eat,
就做一
drink
些这
from
个
the
打扮，就是
lake,
装饰一
and
下。
then they would rest
就然
under
后
the
在有
shades
些草
of
地的话呢，就是也做一点简单的
shades
化妆，
of
就是
uh,
然后
a
然后这
pine
样的
tree,
话，就是
and
但他
then
们
they
的
would
这种干树是比较
then
比较艰难
do
的啊。
some
我们
maybe
现在很多人
makeup
就是
or
为什么朋友之间呢，
try
经
to
常是
make
这
their
个
fur
互
look
怼啊，
beautiful
就是
by
然后呢，
shaking and
就
so
是
on.
就是特别就是生这个长恨心这样那样，然后就互相都就特别的这
So
种
simple-minded
关系
brings
很
lots
复
of
杂，就越来越
contentment.
复杂
But
啊。
what I
其实
notice nowadays
应
is
该
that
是人这
people
个活在这个世
are
界上啊，
very
生命
easily
是
to
非常
get
短暂的。如
very
果太这个复杂，这样没有必
suspicious
要
of
的。
one
那尤
another,
其是这
even
个朋友，
friends.
就是这个不
In
管是
fact,
金刚导游
people
也
have
好，还有
very
我们
short
这
period,
个其
short
他这个
life.
素不相识的这些
And
人的话呢，
in
就是
such
应
kind
该
of
就
complexity,
还是这
if
个
you were
有
to
有
have
一种
such
叫
a
做是
mentality of
什么就
complexity,
是大
then
智
your
若愚吧，
life would
就
be
是大智若愚，
wasted
就是有智慧的人呢，
with
也许可
such
能内
kind
在
of
比较明确，但是呢，就是
lots
他
of
不会特
thoughts.
别的这个计较。
It
而
is
且有智慧的人呢，
probably
重要
better
的
to
事
be
情呢，就
simple.
是他很会这个
Some
分
people
析啊、
may
重
seem
视
to
啊
be
这
very
样的。
simple,
但
but
不重要的这个事情呢，他
simpleness
不会特别的计较。但是
sometimes
没有
is a
智慧的
sign
人呢，
of
不重
wisdom.
要的事情就是他就特
when it comes to important matters, then they would contemplate and they know how to use their wisdom at the most important part. They know how to use their wisdom at the blade of the knife, so to speak. But there are people who don't. There are people who use their wisdom on trivial matters. So when it comes to friendship and comes to interpersonal relationships, whether with your friends or your relatives and family members and so on, I think it is quite important to remain simple.
就是你给我说一句话啊，你给我
Some
说这句话是你的动机是什么？你的原因
people
是什么？那你的这个
in
家
some
族就是
people
原
in
来就是可能几百年你的
Tibet,
爷爷跟我
I
的爷
think
爷有仇
sometimes
的，就是
they
因为这个原因，你今天是
purposely
肯
or
定有目的告诉我
without
的。所以有
knowing,
些老师可能没什么
not
事情做的，
knowingly,
然后把
they
这些事情小题大做，就是然后就有
make
很
things
多
more
这个
complex
可能是人
without
的很
any
容易
meaning.
是一些愚
They
笨的
would
这个
start
原
looking
因啊。
for
就是
because so
原
and
来
so you
我
did
们
so
那
and so,
个
and
在
then
初中
started
的时候呢，
arguing
就是
and
当
making
时上课
things
成绩不太好嘛，
unnecessarily
然后
difficult
就我
for
们
other
这个
people and
在上次圣
themselves.
殿有几个人，
When I
然
was
后
in
有一个
Chengdu,
喇嘛呢
when
就
Ponce
经常特
Rinpoche
别害
was
怕，今
ill
天怎
at
么
that
样？
time,
好像上次有点不好
and
意思，
a
上次
few
那个
of
是不
us
是有点
were
不好意思？
around
是不是我
him.
做错了事情呢？ 然
Ponce
后另外有一个看
Rinpoche,
我，你不要再胡说来
around
人家
Ponce
就简单
Rinpoche,
化
there was a Lama.
就不要
He was
顾虑
very
太多
sensitive.
了。
He
实
kept
际
on
上，
saying that,
就
well,
确实是上师就不会
I
这样，
feel
确
I
实也
did
这样，
something
不管
wrong
上师也
because
好，道友也
Ponce
好，
Rinpoche's
我们人与
expression
人
is
之
very
间的话
different.
呢，
Did I do
应该
something
是
wrong?
就相处
And
的话
then a
就比
different
较
Lama said
有
that
信
to
任就
stop
可以。
thinking
如
in
果没
such
有
a way.
信
You're
任的
just
话呢，
making
你再怎
you're
么
just
样，
making
所
things
有的
more
这个
complex
可
than
能你
it
的内
has
脏
to
掏
be.
出来的话呢，就是还是这个内
Of
脏掏
course,
出来也
as
是血
a
肉之
as
躯来的，
a
只要你心
an
里信任的
enlightened
就
master,
是
he's
没
not
没有
going
办法，
to
所以跟别人
have
合作也好，
different
或者
have
是这个一
such a
起这个修
complexity of
行也好，
emotions
做
towards
任何
whatever
事情的
little
话呢，
things you have
人对
you may
人
have
要
done.
有这个心来就是
So
很好的。如果你不信的话呢，那怎么
when it
样？
comes
人就是
to
是一个复杂的动物，
cooperating
跟
with
其他的
others,
动物
when
有
it
点不
comes
同，
to
每个人
then
都有
working
不
with
同的一
others
些
and
这
so
个
on, I think it
就是
is
这种
important to
规矩啊，
develop
不同的
trust and
讲
faith
话的
in
这个手
others,
段，那这样
to
越来越
maintain
这
a
个复
sense
杂，很
of
令人。所以，
trust
我们以后
and
呢，尤其是这个佛教徒呢，
simplicity in
希望
terms
大家
of
应该很多事情
relationship.
呢，就是
Otherwise,
有意义
it
的事
is
情呢，你可以重视
it
地
could
分析
create
研究
lots
研
of
讨啊，
unnecessary
这个
suffering
你
and
的智慧
troubles.
最好是发挥所有的智慧来。如果没有意
Yes,
义的，
when
不
it
是很
comes
重要的
to
一些取
important
小的
matters,
话呢，
you can
应该
use
是自己
all
还
your
是
wisdom
装的这
to
个
debate,
本
to
意，就
discuss,
显
to
得
think,
简
to
单一点。
contemplate.
就前
But
两天
when
我
it
们
comes to
就
trivial
是
matters, and then I
有一
think
个
it
法
is
师
the
也是
best
在
to
说，
just
说是
be
人生
simple.
很短暂，就是说简单一点，不要考虑那么多，就这种事情呢，我
Master
觉
said
得
that
也是很好的，就是现在有一种说
life
法
is
叫做
short.
不管什么事情
Be
去做
simple.
就好了，就是
Don't
去
think
做
too
就好
much.
啊，就
I
是
think
你
this
要
is really
有
well
兴趣的
said.
话呢，你去做，就是不用这个就很多的这个
There's a
顾虑
saying
尤
that
其是
whatever
利益
it
众
is,
生和学
just
习
do
方
it.
面呢，大家
Just
更
do
要
it.
那个去
Don't
去
think
直
too
接
much,
就是把
especially
这
when
个
it comes
该
to
学的、该
benefiting
修的、
others
该
and
做的
in
事情呢，
terms
就
of
要做
studying
下
the
去，就
Dharma.
这样是
So
这
just
个
do
可
it.
能对你来讲这是最
Whatever you have to do.
这是
The
第二个方
studying,
面，
the
第三个方面
practice,
了。然后
the
第四
contemplation,
对，
the
这是第
beneficial
四个
activities, and
对
so
吧？
on. Just
就
do
是那么
it.
生命就是对
That
这
would be
个
very
家人、
meaningful.
对父母、对国君、对朋友，
So that's the fourth
是
aspect.
这样的一种这个信任。那这样的话呢，就是随遇未学。
So the previous ones
就是
we've already talked
无敌
about
位
how
之
to
需
then relate to
那
the
么
four
这样的
different
话呢，就是
kinds
虽然
of
纵然
people
就是
in
没
your
有这个有些
or
说是
around you,
就你的这个学问
the
也不
family
好，你学
members,
的呢
the
就是并不是
parents
并
and
不是
the
很多的
superiors
但
and
这
the
个
friends.
自下
And
呢
then
就是我认为呢，就是他
For
这个
such kind of
是
people,
最
though, maybe
最好的
he
吧
may
啊
say
就
that
是
he's not
有时候我们
he
知
lacks
识跟教
learning.
养呢，就是
I would
经常
surely call him
混
learned.
为一体。其实有了知识呢，就是不一定
Sometimes
是你有这个
I think
教养
we
而且古人的话呢，
mix
生
the
命的
terms
最基
of
本呢，就是
knowledge
最根本的
and
就是学的根本。但是可能我们
educated.
现在这个教育呢，并不是很重视的。
In
我们在
fact,
学校里面就是你将来就
the
是对
roots
自己的
of
这个家人
education
怎么对待啊，就是内在的这个
is
这
stated
种
above
德性
in
很
this
重视啊，
teaching.
对父母要好好的诚实啊，对国君要如实的这个诚实啊。
When
然后
it
对朋友
comes
如何这
to
个
educated people, I think as educated ones, then you should relate to these different members in the ways that's stated previously. But this is not really taught extensively in our current education system. Of course, knowledge is important, but what's more important is that if the person person is then educated in terms of his character. Otherwise, even if you may have lots of knowledge, you probably would still appear to be very uneducated. I think I read this news that a beautiful woman was in was fighting with a different one on the airplane, maybe because of getting the luggage or something, some trivial matter. And then these two women started arguing. And one person started to then one of them started to curse in Japanese. And then the other person responded by such cursing in Japanese as well. And then that person one started to curse in French. And this beautiful woman started cursing back in French as well. And then both of them started to argue back and forth in the English language. So with the three languages, these two people started arguing. I'm sure they're very knowledgeable of language. They're very knowledgeable in terms of these, but in terms of are they educated, I have grave doubts. Just as there are people who may have lots of high academic achievement, however, other than the knowledge that they've accumulated, they may be quite arrogant and full of jealousy and very complex and really difficult to deal with, not easygoing, not big-hearted. So other than the knowledge they accumulated, there's nothing educated about them. So the Easterners, the Westerners, the ancient one, the previous generation, the new generation, I think we all need to then differentiate and study the ancient wisdom. In fact, lots of people, they may have gained such knowledge of this text, but have they then practiced this knowledge in their life? That's the main question. We should practice this rather than only accumulate the knowledge of it. Some Buddhists, I think they are really good at the doctrines of the teaching of the Dharma. In fact, this time I wanted to give teaching on this is because I want to then give the teaching on the Analects along with Mipo Rinpoche's and Gujum Rinpoche's and many other Buddhist masters' teaching in terms of how to be a person, how to relate to others altogether. And when I can give this altogether, I hope that it could bring you great benefits in terms of relating to other people. According to Master Oyi, sometimes he explains in his commentary from a Buddhist aspect. Sometimes he explains it in a very profound way. Sometimes he talks about there's no characteristic of self, of other, of things like that. I think this is too high of realization or too high of a level of explaining this, the Analects. But of course, you can then explain it from different aspects, different perspectives. And maybe that would be helpful to you. That's very possible too. Now the 8th chapter. The 8th chapter then is Confucius. The previous one was the one by disciple. Now it's Confucius. So the master said, if a man of position, that is Junzi, does not have integrity, he will not inspire all, and when he tries to learn, he will not preserve to the end. Such a man should stay close to those who do their best and are trustworthy. He should not befriend those who are not his equals, and when he makes a mistake, he should not be afraid to correct it. So if a person doesn't have integrity, in fact, over here, the integrity in the Chinese language, it also means the steadiness. Doesn't have a sense of authoritativeness. There are people nowadays who do not receive any kind of respect from others. And from certain aspect, it could be that the person doesn't have a sense of steadiness. It is repeated sayingly that a junzi is you could explain it as a person of or a man of a position, or you could say that someone of integrity or someone or a gentleman. There are different ways of explaining it. For such kind of person who, for such kind of person, they should maintain a certain kind of steadfastness. As Mipa Rinpoche said, that a person should then maintain steadfast in terms of the body, and in terms of speech, a person should have a speech just as a sage, because a sage wouldn't speak. Would not make frivolous speech. Therefore, their language is very much respected and taken seriously. According to the two conducts, it says that those who are not steady in body will be bullied, like the yak with broken horns. If a person doesn't have a sense of steadiness in terms of their body, in terms of their action, maybe one day that person is here today and then the other place a different day, and scratch around even during sitting, then such kind of actions shows frivolousness and is not taken seriously most of the time. You can, in fact, definitely tell if a person is steady or not. Just as a yak without horns, and then all the other yaks would then bully the one who does not have a yak. I think Mipa Rinpoche is probably also a herder. That's why he used lots of this kind of herding metaphors. But maybe Confucius is rather a farmer, and he used lots of farming metaphors. The first one then talks about the body aspect of then the second one talks about the language aspect. Those who are not solemn in speech will be resented and criticized by others, like the scavenging crow. There are people who talk too much. They would speak of ill of others and talk about their afflictions, and they can't stop talking. They don't have the ability of being mindful of their own speech. They would continuously speak, just like a scavenging crow, which makes lots of people feeling annoyed, because the crows would make the kind of sound that is not pleasant to hear, and it's a sign of unlucky. Then the next one talks about the steady character. Those who are not of steady character will be lost like leaves carried off by the wind. There are people who think of this, think of that, and their mind goes here and there. If their mind is like that, then their body and speech will also be influenced. If the mind doesn't have this kind of steadiness, but goes along with the different thoughts, then such kind of thinking would lead them to different kind of places in terms of their body. Maybe they want to go to this place today and go to a different place tomorrow. They want to practice one today, practice two on the different day, maybe be happy today and not very happy on the second day. So if a person doesn't have a steadiness, doesn't have such steadiness, then other people won't take such kind of people seriously. Just as great masters stated, a true leader would not depart from his or her throne. Rather, he or she would then abide on his own on one's own throne with great steadiness. I think I told you this before. In fact, the people around you, they're like they're very keen in terms of observing you through your own speech and through your speech and mind, through your body, speech, and mind. Other people will be very easily to tell whether you are a person of a beneficial mind or kind heart or very sly. They can tell very easily, just like how a police could easily tell if the other people are good or bad. Some of the teachings, I think, is really worthy of reciting in the Analects. Mipa Rinpoche's teaching about the steadiness of body, mind, and speech is taught about 2,000 years ago by Confucius. So the wise ones, they noticed and they have such kind of observation and teaching. The next one then talks about the learning. When he tries to learn, he will not persevere to the end. If a person studies, or if a person doesn't study, let it be worldly knowledge or the transmundane knowledge or dharmic knowledge, then this person would be blinded by their ignorance, and they could be very stubborn to their own opinion, and whatever and however other people try to convince them with the words of truth, they would not listen. It is not that they're not. It is not that such kind of stubbornness is their personality. In fact, it is because of lack of knowledge and lack of learning. You cannot say that I am just stubborn, this is my personality. That's not true. In fact, there are the people who studied many books, many volumes of books, and there are people who then traveled for a long distance and meet a lot of people. Then such kind of people will gain different knowledge and become much more flexible. I noticed that there are people who study the Dharma, and people have, upon studying the Dharma, they really transform. Their actions are very much different than the ones who have never studied the Dharma. I'm not saying that people can practice 100% of what they've studied, but at least studying and not studying definitely makes a difference to the mentality, to the character. There are people who after studying their mentality and their body, mind, and speech, definitely get much more easygoing. As Mipa Rinpoche said, that there are people you can tell if a person is a practitioner by his speech, body speech, and you can tell if a person is fed by the look on his face or the color of his cheeks. People without studying the Dharma, they're very coarse. They are very stubborn and coarse. They only feel that they themselves are the greatest, but they feel none of the others could be comparable to them. So, according to Patrul Rinpoche, he said that for those people who practice and study for a while, then their mind and their personality is as soft and as gentle as cotton, and they're easygoing as the butter that is melted in the porridge. What is the butter in porridge? They're very tasty, really yummy, huh? I like your metaphor. I think Patrul Rinpoche heard your explanation of his metaphor. He probably would feel very heartbroken because that's not what he meant at all. Lucky him who already passed away. He doesn't have to then listen to your explanation anymore. So, upon studying this, upon studying the Dharma, lots of people's mind definitely transforms to be much more pliable. I know that there are the ones who then you can't even talk to them for 5 minutes without them talking about other people's faults. I think that's really unnecessary because we need to really look into our own mind rather than other people. We should look at ourselves rather than other people. But for people who study the Dharma, I'm sure they're not that coarse anymore. They're more pliable than the ones who do not. Yesterday, in fact, I felt really sad. I was really saddened because my teachers have all passed away. All the teachers whom taught me before, they have one common characteristic, and that is that they have only the mind of benefiting others, and they have no malicious mind at all towards anyone. And it is not only for 1 day or 2 days. In fact, they have this mind of benefiting others towards for all sentient beings every single day, and they dedicated their whole life towards all sentient beings. And the precious teachings that they inherent in their mind stream have then generously shared to all of us. And it is because of them, though we are not fully accomplished, but we definitely have already received such blessings and wisdom from them. Yesterday, I think during the second half of the teaching of Uttara Tantra Shastra, I really remembered the lamas, the teachers that I studied from, and their teachings, their demeanors, their methods of teaching their students are different. but their mind are the same. Their mind are only for benefiting others, but not malicious to others. And upon contemplating all of their qualities, I definitely felt that I need to progress further. So, all the great masters from the past, I think we should look up to them, and we should strive to be as close as we can to them. As I said, that Ponsok Rinpoche studied for 6 years, and he received the full blessings and knowledge from his Lama in this short 6 years. And look at us, and there are people who then went to, for example, Harvard and different prestigious universities. They would receive certificates marked by the university. Similarly, the knowledge that we receive from our teachers, then we should have this characteristics or personalities that is of our masters. We should not point at them saying that, oh, this is wrong, that is wrong. That's not what we should do. Then the next one says, such a man should stay close to those who do their best and are trustworthy. So one should remain loyal, should remain trustworthy. And some of the commentaries stated that this sentence and the next one should be combined, and some said that it should be separated. And then the next one says that he should not befriend those who are not his equals. Some explanations or commentaries said that you should not befriend the ones who are less than you. I think this kind of explanation is rather partial, because you can only have the ones who are higher of you. I don't think that's very possible. But I think the best way of explaining it is rather do not take the ones, the kind of friends are less of you. You should sometimes from appearance, from the surface, maybe they are not as good as you in terms of maybe their looks or maybe their academic achievements or maybe their knowledge and different aspects. But I think we should then look at others in the way that we should try to see their advantages, because there are so there are the rulers that the short rulers cannot measure, and there are the concise measurements that a long ruler can't measure. So some people have different advantages. You should try your best to study from others. Even if it's for a person who is not necessarily your best friend, but you should at least try from different aspects to see the other person's good points. Maybe previously you feel that one person is really bad, but later on you may feel that the other person, you slowly could discover that person's advantage or the other person's good points.
时间长了以后呢，就会就是
So
所有的人
basically, you
变
just
成
need to
这个
change your
就是这种
perspective.
朋友，就是也变
And
成智者，就
slowly
像
and
这个撒迦
slowly,
班的他在各样宝藏里面
you'll be
讲，
able
就
to
是知之
discover
知是
that
是有
everyone could be
也
your
取他人
friends.
智慧的，
And
虽然有些人是很有
everyone,
智慧
you
的，
can learn
他
from
很愿意接受
everyone,
别人的
and you
这
can
个
get
这
knowledge
个微
from
笑，这个
everyone.
功德，长
Just
期如是
as
信使
from
者，书成一切智
stated
者。
in the
他说，如果我们长期这样
stated
做的
by
话，那就
Sakyapandita
自
in
己也是变成这
his
个智者，自己也
in
变成。
his
如
text
果我
that
们
is
没有这样，
the
自己觉
treasury
得很傲
of
慢，
good
也不愿意
advice,
接受
saying that
别人
although
的。
the wise have
像以前的一些
immeasurable
上师的话，
learning, they still
自己还
embrace
是
the
很有这种
lesser
学问的知
knowledge
识，
of
但
others
经常呢就
by
是听
means
别
of
人的，就
continuously
是
practicing thus.
就我觉得还是这是
They
很有必
quickly
要的。包括我
proceed
们有
to
些当中生活的
omniscience.
话，那还是很这个谦虚的，就是经常听别人的辅导啊，
I
就是
think
让
this
别
is
人
quite
来这
necessary
个就是给自己就是经常就是讲啊，就是自
to
己
be
很
humble,
虔
to
很虔诚
listen
的
to
就
other
问一些
people's
问题啊。
teaching,
那这样
to
的话，其实
listen to
是
other
通过别人
people's
的这个授予的话，
ideas
那
and
就哪里
perspectives.
哪里也是学
So
到
being
很多这个
humble,
知识。因此我们这个一
in
致这个
fact,
朋友的
could
时候呢，就是都不要就是太
give
傲
you
慢。
lots
然
of
后
opportunities
啊
to
就是
study
这
and
一章
learn
最后
and
一个呢
gain
不
lots
自
of
我感
knowledge.
感
Therefore,
那么
try not to be so
有了这个
arrogant.
过失的时候，就是
And
自己
then
不管是曾可以哪些这个
it is
犯
stated
错误，就是
that
那个时候呢，
and
不要
when he
害怕，
makes a
就不要
mistake,
这
you
个
should
担
not
心
be
呐，
afraid to
就
correct
是
it.
就忏悔
When
啊，
people
就
make
就
mistakes,
改
do
正
not
啊，
feel
就是
afraid.
这个，因为人非圣贤，孰人无过，就是人
You
都
should
会有不
then
同的这种
be
过失，尤其是我
courageous
们凡夫人
and
的话，那就是肯定有各种各样的这种
try to
过失。
correct
但
your
是这个
mistake.
并不是最可怕的，
Everyone
最
makes
可怕的是
mistakes,
什么呢？就是我们这个人呢，就是要隐藏自己
especially
的
for
这种
mundane
过患
beings.
啊，就
We
隐藏自己的
definitely
过患。
makes
就像《长
mis-
行
we
经》里
definitely
面讲，
make
就是若有
mistakes,
功德当自
but do not
这个
hide
诛
your
藏啊，
mistake.
就是若有过失呢，就是当
Just
自罚
as it
啊，
is
就是我
said
们
in the
一
long
般来讲
discourse
呢，就是
of
如果
the
有了这
sutra,
个
it
过
says
失，
that
有了功德的话，那就是不
if
要
one
去显
possesses
啊，
any
我
any
我是度
precious
的大
qualities,
学啊，
one
我
should
是
hide or
这
hold
个
them
学
back.
什么什么的
If
啊，
one
就是
have
我的这
with
个
if one has any
这智
faults,
慧，我
one
的才才，
shall
我的
openly confess them
什么
all.
什么，凡是就很多
When you
自己
have
稍微
some
有一
kind of
点点
precious
这种功
qualities
德的
such
话呢，
as
就
your
相信自己
wisdom,
吧
your
啊，
wealth,
就
your
跟别人
academic
显现，其实这是
achievements,
不好的，就是自己
any
还是谦虚的，自
small
己有的功德呢，即使你见到本
precious
尊也好，
qualities
就
that
是
you have,
有些人的是经常啊，
do
我
not
上次对
try
我
to
好
show them
好
off.
的
Rather, you
啊，
should
就
be
是某
humble.
个人对我特别好，就是其实就是这个上师也好，
Maybe
道友也好，并没
by
有对他怎么
seeing
样，
the
但是呢，他就中间就是假
your
装
own
很好，
deity
就
or
啊，他对我就是
the
说啊，就是我以前见到过一个人，
or
其实
if
是他对
the
那个领导之间的关系呢
that
是
you
并不是
maybe
那么好，但是他在很多
started
场合
saying
当
that
中
oh
啊，这
this
个领导对
this
我特别
famous
好，
person is
他
really
如果
good
说
to
我
me,
有些人听着呢是有点那个
such as a
就是
person
带
would
着
brag
微笑的
about
这
how
种
his
听着。
manager is very nice to him,
就是这样的，
though it is
因
not
为
the
就有
truth.
些事情的话呢，就是一直
Sometimes I
很
would
想炫
listen
耀，
with
就
a
是这样
smile,
的。
but
然后
not
有了
making
这
any
个过失
comments.
的话呢，就是应该就
Because
是要
sometimes
这个报啊，就是
there are
这
people
个什么
who
发露
really
忏
want to
悔啊，
brag.
就是发露忏悔，就是这是佛教也是这样
Try
讲的，
not
就
to
是
do
其
that.
实儒家的话呢，就是也是
What
这
you
样的，
should
过错的
then
时候还是会
is to
会
confess
改
your
改
faults
改
and
正。大部
expose
涅
your
槃经里
faults
面
to
也讲
others
知
rather
罪
than
恶
brag about
疑
your
者呢就是
precious
造
qualities.
作恶，儿子的话那就是造诣忏悔啊，就以前我们这个《地藏圣人经》当中也有讲，
According
就
to
是其实智者
the
的话有
Great
两种，一个
Parinirvana
呢，他
Sutra,
肯
the
定有
Mahaparinirvana
这个
Sutra,
就是
it says
根
that
本不
of
造
the
的。
wise, there
人
are the two
现在有
kinds.
自
One
己
is
的
the
身
person
体
who
特
does
别
not do
激进，
evil,
就是不
and
愿
the
意
other
就是
is the
造恶
person
的
who
啊，就是确实
repents
不
after
愿意
having
造的
committed
这些。
evil.
还有一种
So
呢，就是虽然造了，但是
the two
还
kinds
是
of
很愿意
people,
这个
one
忏
is
悔。
the
我看
kind
到
of
阿底峽
person
这
who
个
have
传记，
never or
怎么
had
讲
never made any
造成
mistakes,
造成
very pure in
造罪
terms
就
of
是
their
上了忏，
actions and
然后下入
speech
造
and
罪呢，
mind.
晚上忏。
And the
就
other one
是
is even
余罪
after
余罪
making
呢，就是
mistakes, they are brave enough to
不住
repent.
痛饮啊，就是不住过夜， 就这样的这个。
The ones
就是
who
说
makes
如果我
mistakes
们
in the
早上犯了
morning,
错误的话呢，
they
不
can
就
then
是
repent
不到
in
下午
the
就是最
afternoon
好
or
上午发
evening.
现的时候马上
And
要
the
把忏
ones
悔。然后
who
如果你下午就是
makes
造了一些罪
mistake
的话
in
呢，
the
最好
afternoon,
是晚上睡觉之前，就是凡
oh,
是这个
the ones
罪
who
呢
makes a
从
mistake
来
in the
不算
morning, you
过
should
于，
then
这个
repent
很重
before
要。比如说
afternoon. And the
我们
ones
两个尽量保
who
之间
makes
就有一
mistakes in the
些这个
afternoon, you
口
should
角啊，或者是发
repent
生一些
before
矛盾。
evening, so
尽量
that
的
the
就是不
mistakes
过于
would
不向
not
这个忏悔，
then
就一直是在这个心里面
who would not let it go overnight. Just as some Vajra friends or the Vajra Sangha should not have fights and not repent at all, because such mistakes would then accumulate. After 3 years, if you do not, it is stated in the three vows that you should repent. You should repent before 3 years or within 3 years, especially for the Vajra Sangha. Do not let it pass over a week, a month, or a year, and so on. So do not procrastinate. Phuntsog Rinpoche's requirement is that the kind of people who do not talk to one another should not stay in Larungar. They do not have such privilege to stay in this pure and undefiled center. If one cannot get along with the Sangha member, then the person is not considered as a Vajra Sangha, is not qualified to receive the empowerments. There are the Sangha, the Vajra Sanghas, who hold a grudge towards one another and view each other as enemies. And for this kind of people, I really feel that they should not stay in our practice place, in our center. And for this kind of people, I really hope that you should not stay over here, because this world is rather very big. Other than our small community, there are much bigger space outside where you can have all the hatred and sense of grudge wherever you want. Because once you make a defilement of the vows, then it would pollute the whole Sangha. So for those of you who have such grudge, who have such kind of a hatred towards one another, should not stay here. In fact, to me, I think even if those of you who do not have the ability to benefit others, you should try to maintain a pure vow. At least you should, even if you have this kind of grudge or this kind of anger towards one another, you should try to confess as soon as possible, and do not let it go overnight. Patrul Rinpoche would use a small wooden mandala to confess all of his little misdeeds. But I know that as Monday means, we won't be able to do that right away, but at least you should try your best to confess. There are people who said that it is my personality, therefore I cannot change my personality. But the Dharma has this ability, has such a power to then correct you, to make changes in your mind stream. If there are hunters and murderers who can become great masters in Buddhism or because of Buddhist teachings, then why can't you? Our life is short. And in this short life, if you don't practice, not only you do not practice, you purposely try to create harm and disharmony inside a pure Sangha. This is quite unfortunate, because karma is because karma is unfailing. Therefore, you should be very careful with it. If you do not be very careful with all of these kind of vows, you will definitely bring harm to yourself and others and the Sangha. So, anger should be repentant, especially the kind of anger that you have towards one another. If you have grave anger, then that you cannot resolve and do not repent, then I suggest you to just leave the Sangha. Because by having such anger and complaining to one another, you really create lots of chaos and lots of difficulty to manage the Sangha. Sometimes I feel that lots of people who do not have who don't even have faith have a much better or more pliable personality than the practitioners. So for practitioners, the more you practice, the more anger you have within you. It is not really helpful, isn't it? I think next chapter is in fact very important, and I don't want to delay it to next class, but I think maybe I'll give the teaching next class. Next class will be wonderful. The next chapter is going to be wonderful, very interesting. But today we've already extended too much of our class, so maybe next class I will give teaching on that one. For Buddhists who already taken the Pratika vows and the Bodhisattva vows and Samaya vows, after taking up such vows, I think you must have already made some mistakes that violates any or all of those vows. But at least what you should do is to confess. It's very difficult to be the ones who have never ever made mistakes, but since you've already, you should try to communicate with one another. You should confess, not only confess in your own mind, you should then try to communicate with one another. In fact, you do not have any deep anger towards one another. So you should try to communicate and make sure that you do not hold grudge towards one another. And in such a way, the protectors would protect us and would create more auspicious dependent origination. Therefore, for the Vajrasangha, as Pontsog Rinpoche said, the most important is to maintain a pure vow, to practice, to contemplate, and to benefit sentient beings. And that's really the most important aspect of the core of our Sangha. So you should then first keep the pure vow, and the second one is to study, contemplate, and practice. And then with such contemplation, steady contemplation and practice, you can then benefit others. This is the system or the step-by-step guide that's given by Pontsog Rinpoche through his Vajra words. So lay practitioners have the lay practitioners' vows, and the monastics have monastics' vows. And without keeping the vow, then you won't be able to, without keeping the pure vow, you won't be able to study and contemplate and practice, and don't even mention about benefiting others. So for those of you who want to stay in this group, then I really think that it's quite essential for you to reconcile with one another and maintain a pure vow with one another. Do not hold a grudge with one another. I think today I am being rather quite strict. I'm not really pointing to any particular one of you, but this is a general guideline that we should all abide. I think everyone should look inside yourself. I myself also reflect upon myself very often. Previously, we studied that I reflect upon myself 3 times a day. So we then also should reflect upon ourselves with the right mindfulness. This is quite crucial, and we'll stop here today.